When you're driving down the highway and that little engine temperature gauge on the dashboard starts creeping up into the red zone, you don't just ignore it.
No, of course not. You pull over immediately.
Right. You pull over because you know that if you don't cool that engine down right away, the oil degrades, the pistons expand, and eventually the entire system is just going to seize up completely.
Exactly. It's a mechanical absolute. The car simply cannot function past a certain thermal threshold. It really doesn't matter how badly you need to get to your destination or how hard you press the gas.
Yeah, the laws of thermodynamics are going to win that battle every single time.
Every time.
But then, you look at how we treat our own biology, specifically when it comes to sleep and insomnia, and suddenly we completely ignore our own internal temperature gauge.
We really do. We treat the inability to fall asleep like it's entirely a negotiation with our own racing thoughts.
Yeah, we lie there thinking, if I can just meditate enough, or if I can just stop stressing about tomorrow's presentation, my brain will magically power down.
Right. We view insomnia through this incredibly narrow, purely psychological lens. The assumption is just that mental stress is the sole barrier to sleep.
Which, stress definitely doesn't help.
Oh, absolutely. Psychological hyper-arousal is a massive factor. But focusing only on calming the mind completely misses the foundational physical requirement that has to be met first.
Wait, so the physical requirement actually trumps the mental state?
Yes, exactly. You can have the calmest mind in the world, but if the physical environment of your body isn't primed, you are still going to be staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m.
Which is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to this deep dive. Today we are unpacking some incredible clinical excerpts on longevity and performance science that fundamentally rethink how we actually achieve deep restorative rest.
It's a completely different paradigm.
It really is.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to look at why a lot of the common knowledge about falling asleep might be completely backwards.
All right.
And, how you could literally hack your biological master switch to conquer sleep onset insomnia just by manipulating your core body temperature.
Yeah, shifting the perspective away from the mind and focusing strictly on the thermal environment of the body. It changes everything about how we approach recovery.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that common assumption is just so deeply ingrained in our culture. You lie in bed, you toss and turn, you feel anxious, and you blame your brain for refusing to shut down.
Right, the brain gets all the blame.
So I want to understand the argument that the true gateway to sleep isn't psychological at all, but is actually a strict thermal gateway.
Well, to really grasp this, we have to separate the psychological stress from the underlying physiological mechanism. The clinical reality of human biology is that to transition from a state of wakeful alertness into the initial stages of sleep, your core body temperature must drop.
By how much?
By approximately 1 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, 1 to 3 degrees. On paper, that sounds incredibly small.
It does sound small, but when we are talking about human biology, a 3-degree shift in core temperature is massive.
Yeah, I guess a 3-degree fever feels terrible, so a drop would be equally profound.
Exactly. It is a monumental metabolic shift. We are talking about a strict, non-negotiable requirement dictated by your hypothalamus.
And the hypothalamus is like the body's central thermostat, right?
Yes, the central thermostat working with your circadian rhythm. And when we say core, we are specifically talking about the internal temperature of your brain and your visceral organs.
So like your heart, lungs, liver, all that deep internal stuff.
Right. During your waking hours, your core temperature steadily rises. It typically hits its absolute peak in the late afternoon or early evening.
Which is usually when I feel the most awake anyway.
Exactly. That peak perfectly correlates with your highest levels of daytime alertness, cognitive function, and overall metabolic activity.
That tracks perfectly with how a normal day feels. You're active, digesting meals, moving around. Your internal engine is literally running hot to generate all that energy.
But as evening approaches, the body has to completely shift gears. It has to prepare for the massive cellular repair and memory consolidation processes that happen during sleep.
And to do that, it needs to hit that 1 to 3 degree drop.
Right. And to achieve that required drop, the cardiovascular system actively pushes warm blood away from those deep internal organs and out toward the surface of the skin.
Oh, wow. So it's physically moving the heat.
Yes. And it specifically targets the distal extremities, meaning your hands, your feet, and your face.
Okay, the clinical term for this is vasodilation, if I'm remembering the notes correctly.
Got it. Vasodilation.
The blood vessels are essentially widening to let that heat escape. So if my core is an oven, my hands and feet are basically the open oven door trying to let all that trapped heat out into the kitchen.
What's fascinating here is how perfectly that oven analogy captures the vulnerability of the entire process. Your hands, feet, and face act as biological radiators.
Yeah.
Vasodilation rushes the hot blood to these specific areas so the heat can be dumped into the surrounding air. If you close the oven door, if this thermal dump is interrupted for any reason at all, the onset of sleep becomes biologically impossible.
Biologically impossible.
Yeah.
So the core just can't cool down.
Exactly. The core cannot cool, and the entire system simply stays awake.
Which brings me to something I really struggle with based on these findings. Think about the mainstream, commercialized ideal of a good night's sleep.
Oh, the cozy aesthetic.
Right. It is always marketed as this incredibly cozy experience. It's piling on heavy, thick blankets, flannel sheets, maybe even wearing thick socks to bed and keeping the bedroom nice and toasty.
It's everywhere.
But if we are buried under all those layers, it seems physically impossible for the body to actually dump that heat out of the oven door.
You are hitting on arguably the biggest myth and the largest barrier to quality rest in modern society. Piling on heavy blankets in a warm room completely short-circuits the vasodilation process.
Because the heat has nowhere to go.
Right. Your body is trying desperately to push heat to your hands and feet to release it. But when you are bundled up in a warm room, that radiating heat hits a literal wall.
It just hits the blanket and stops.
It hits the blanket, gets trapped, and reflects right back into your body. The ambient temperature under those covers becomes too high to accept any more heat.
Oh, I see. So your core temperature just stays elevated artificially.
Yes. And your hypothalamus registers this high temperature and interprets it as a clear biological signal for daytime wakefulness.
Wait, really? It thinks it's daytime just because you're warm.
Exactly. It effectively suppresses the release of melatonin, the hormone that signals darkness and sleep. This keeps your nervous system in a state of hyper-arousal.
Regardless of how exhausted your muscles or your mind might actually feel.
Right.
That is wild. Your brain is literally reading the trapped heat and saying, well, it's hot, the sun must be high in the sky, keep the engine running, stay alert.
You are actively fighting your own evolutionary biology just by trying to be comfortable.
That is so counterintuitive.
You are sending conflicting signals to your nervous system. You are lying in the dark, which signals night, but your thermal environment is signaling high noon, and the thermal signal almost always wins.
To really conceptualize this, the clinical notes use a thermodynamics metaphor that I think makes this incredibly clear. They compare the human body to a high-performance, enterprise-grade computer processor.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Yeah, like something you would find in a massive, climate-controlled server room.
It is arguably the most accurate way to visualize the mechanics of sleep. During the day, your biological processor is running incredibly demanding software.
Like making complex executive decisions, managing physical movement, that kind of thing.
Exactly. You are managing balance, processing visual and auditory stimuli, and of course, managing emotional stress. And a computer running at maximum processing capacity generates a massive amount of thermal byproduct.
Oh yeah, anyone who's ever tried to render a video on a laptop and felt the bottom of the machine literally burning their lap knows exactly how much heat a working processor kicks out.
Exactly. Now think about what sleep actually is. Nighttime isn't simply pulling the plug on that machine.
Because if you just yank the power cord out of a running server, you corrupt the hard drives.
Right, you lose data. Sleep is a highly controlled shutdown sequence. It is a vital data backup cycle where short-term memories are transferred to long-term storage.
Like saving your files.
Yes. And it's a hardware maintenance phase where cellular tissues are repaired and toxins are flushed from the brain.
So it's incredibly active.
Very active. But for the server to safely transition into that sleep mode and run those background maintenance programs, the internal cooling fans must activate to lower the core temperature of the processor.
The heat has to be exhausted out of the machine and into the surrounding room.
Exactly.
And mapping this onto our anatomy, our hands and feet are the cooling fans, and the bedroom itself is the physical server room.
That is exactly the case. And the basic laws of thermodynamics dictate that heat always moves to a cooler environment. It wants to find equilibrium.
So what does this all mean? Let's say I'm lying in bed, I am incredibly frustrated, I am dead tired, and I just want to sleep. If I try to mentally force myself to just pull the plug and shut down, without letting that biological server room cool my core down first, what is actually happening internally?
The biological computer simply refuses to power down into its restorative state. It remains suspended in a high-alert protective mode.
So I'm just spinning my wheels.
You are essentially leaving the drive spinning indefinitely. You might drift into a very light, fragmented state of unconsciousness purely out of sheer exhaustion, but you will never cross the threshold into deep sleep.
And deep sleep is where the actual therapeutic repair and memory consolidation occur.
Right. You wake up feeling like you were hit by a truck because your hardware was running hot on standby all night instead of actually rebooting.
Okay, this completely reframes the entire concept of insomnia for me. We are establishing that the body absolutely needs to dump heat, and it desperately needs a cool server room to do it.
Absolutely.
So how do we actively force this cooling process? Because the research we are looking at outlines a few very specific zero-cost protocols that anyone listening can actually use tonight.
Yes, highly actionable stuff.
Let's look at the first intervention, which occurs before you even get into bed, the warm evening bath paradox.
This is one of the most highly effective, heavily researched interventions available for sleep onset insomnia.
Okay.
90 to 120 minutes before you intend to go to sleep, you take a moderately warm bath or shower.
I am going to have to stop you there, because taking a hot shower when my ultimate goal is to cool my internal core temperature down sounds completely counterproductive.
It does sound strange at first.
Aren't I just adding more heat to my processor right before I need it to cool off?
This raises an important question, and the apparent contradiction is exactly why it is referred to as a paradox. It seems entirely counterintuitive until you examine the vascular mechanics at play.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics.
The goal of the bath is not to use the heat of the water to warm your core. You are using the external heat to trigger a massive evaporative reaction afterward.
Wait, so I'm basically tricking my body's defense mechanisms.
Precisely. When you submerge yourself in that warm water, the external heat causes profound, immediate, and widespread vasodilation.
Because the body thinks it's overheating.
Right. Your body senses the rapid increase in external temperature, and its defense mechanism kicks in. It says, well, it is getting dangerously hot in this environment. I need to protect the vital internal organs immediately.
So it draws a massive volume of blood away from the core.
Yes, and it pools it right at the surface of your skin, heavily concentrated in your limbs.
It's throwing open every single oven door in the house, all at the exact same time. Like you step out of the shower and your skin is flushed and pink because all the heat has been rushed to the surface.
And then the actual intervention happens. The magic is in the transition.
It happens in the transition.
When you step out of that warm water and into a cool, comfortably air-conditioned room, all of that thermal energy that was just brought to the surface of your skin suddenly evaporates.
Oh, because of the water on your skin.
Exactly. It dissipates rapidly into the cool air. It is a highly accelerated offloading of heat. This triggers a steep, profound drop in your internal core body temperature.
Much faster than your body could achieve on its own by just sitting in a chair, I imagine.
Significantly faster.
That is brilliant engineering.
Yeah.
You're temporarily using the hot water to pull the deep heat out of the core to the surface, just so it can be instantly wiped away by the cool air of the bedroom.
It's incredibly efficient.
And that rapid plunge in temperature sends a massive, undeniable biological signal to your brain that the sun has set, the environment has cooled, and it is time to initiate sleep.
You are intentionally hijacking your body's own thermoregulatory cooling mechanism to manually force the sleep switch down. It is a highly effective way to prime the system.
Okay, so the bath paradox successfully gets us to fall asleep. But what about staying asleep?
Sleep maintenance.
Right, because there is nothing worse than the dreaded middle-of-the-night wake-up. You know the feeling? You wake up at 2 a.m., you are tossing, turning, maybe you had a stressful dream, and you suddenly feel way too warm.
Very common scenario.
The immediate knee-jerk instinct is to just kick all the covers off the bed completely to cool down.
Which is the absolute worst thing you can do for your sleep architecture in that moment.
Right, because if you suddenly throw off all the heavy blankets, you subject your entire body to a sudden rush of cold air. Doesn't that just shock the system?
Yes, it triggers a physiological stress response. When you suddenly expose your entire body to cold, ambient air, your brain registers a potential threat to your core temperature.
It thinks you're freezing to death.
Exactly. To protect you, it spikes your cortisol levels and triggers a mild shivering response to generate heat.
And cortisol is the last thing you want at 2 a.m.
Cortisol is an alertness hormone. It wakes you up even more, elevating your heart rate and pulling you entirely out of a sleep state.
So kicking all the blankets off guarantees you're going to be wide awake for the next hour.
Pretty much.
Instead, the strategy here involves exposing only very specific parts of the body. You are supposed to push exactly your hands or your feet outside from under the covers, leaving the rest of your body insulated.
This ties back beautifully to the anatomy we were discussing earlier regarding the cooling fans. The palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, and the upper half of your face are composed of a very specific type of skin.
I was looking at this term in the clinical notes. It's called glabrous skin, right?
Glabrous skin, yes.
Yeah.
The primary characteristic of glabrous skin is that it is completely hairless.
Okay.
But its real importance lies just beneath the surface. Beneath the glabrous skin on your palms and the soles of your feet is a dense, highly specialized network of vascular structures.
And these are known as arteriovenous anastomoses.
Yes, arteriovenous anastomoses.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because arteriovenous anastomoses sounds incredibly complex, but from what I gather, it's essentially a bypass valve, right?
A bypass valve is a great way to think about it.
Like in household plumbing, where you want to skip the small, slow-moving pipes, so you just open a main bypass valve to release a massive amount of water pressure all at once.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. In a normal vascular system, blood travels from the arteries into tiny, narrow capillary beds and then into the veins.
But these bypass valves skip that.
Right. These arteriovenous anastomoses bypass the capillary beds entirely. They act as direct, high-volume shunts between your arteries and your veins.
Oh, wow.
Because they allow such a massive volume of blood to flow so close to the surface of the skin without slowing down through those tiny capillaries, they act as highly efficient, high-speed portals for heat exchange.
So they aren't just normal blood vessels.
Yeah.
They are specifically designed for thermoregulation.
Entirely designed for it.
So by just exposing the sole of one foot or the palm of one hand to the cool ambient air of the bedroom, sticking it out from under the duvet, you are essentially turning those biological radiators on maximum power.
You are deploying the exhaust pipes without triggering a systemic alarm. You don't need to freeze your entire torso to cool down.
Which would spike the cortisol.
Exactly. By exposing just those specific, highly vascularized surfaces, you steadily and quietly draw the trapped heat away from your internal organs.
And it just lowers your internal temperature smoothly back down into the deep sleep zone.
Smoothly, and all without ever triggering that cortisol-spiking stress response from a full-body chill.
It is so elegantly designed. It totally explains why sticking one leg out from under the covers is such a universal human habit.
We do it instinctively.
Yeah, we do it instinctively without knowing the plumbing behind it. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Ambient bedroom thermal engineering.
The environment itself.
Right. We figured out how to manipulate our internal radiators using the bath and the foot-out technique. But to keep those radiators running efficiently all night, the server room itself has to be continuously optimized.
The external environment must seamlessly support the internal biology. The research is very clear on this. You need to transform your bedroom into a clinical cooling chamber.
A clinical cooling chamber. That sounds intense.
Well, the target ambient temperature for optimal sleep architecture must be set to exactly 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit.
And for anyone listening outside the U.S., that is roughly 18 to 20 degrees Celsius.
Yes.
Okay, I have to be honest and play devil's advocate for a second. 65 degrees sounds freezing for a bedroom.
It does sound chilly to a lot of people.
If I'm lying in bed and the air is so cold that I am physically shivering, how on earth am I supposed to relax my muscles enough to drift into a deep sleep?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of our metabolic needs, that specific temperature range, 65 to 68 degrees, isn't just an arbitrary number they guessed at.
Okay.
It represents the precise clinical thermal threshold where the human body can optimally offload its internal heat into the environment before the involuntary shivering mechanism kicks in.
Ah, I see. So it is the absolute lowest temperature your environment can be without your muscles feeling the need to violently contract to save you from freezing.
Exactly. Shivering is a thermogenic response. The rapid muscle contractions generate heat to warm the core, which is the exact opposite of what we are trying to achieve.
So it ruins the whole cooling process.
Right. 65 to 68 degrees is the absolute biological sweet spot. It provides enough of a thermal gradient to continuously pull the heat out of your hands and feet all night long.
But it's just warm enough that your nervous system feels completely safe to power down the conscious brain without going into a survival mode stress response.
You hit the nail on the head.
And the final critical part of this environmental engineering is the betting on it. Because you can perfectly calibrate your thermostat to 65 degrees, but if you are sleeping under the wrong materials, you are completely ruining the server room's ventilation.
Yes, the research mandates eliminating synthetic materials from your bed entirely.
Because they trap the heat.
Materials like polyester or heavy synthetic fleece are essentially the equivalent of wearing a plastic garbage bag to bed.
Oh, wow. That sounds awful.
Well, they are petroleum-based plastics. They completely trap heat and they trap moisture. They do not breathe at all. So if you are sleeping on polyester sheets or under a synthetic comforter, the thermal energy that is efficiently transferring out of your glabrous skin hits a literal plastic wall.
So it cannot escape into the cool air of the room.
Exactly. It just creates a microclimate of trapped humidity right next to your skin.
So what is the necessary alternative to keep the ventilation flowing?
You need to transition entirely to 100% natural, breathable fibers. We're talking about organic cotton, linen, or bamboo.
Because they let the air through.
Yes, on a microscopic level, these materials are highly porous. They allow for the continuous, uninterrupted transfer of thermal energy and moisture away from your body, through the fabric, and into that carefully temperature-controlled room all night long.
It really is an entire interconnected ecosystem. You can't just pick and choose one part.
No, it has to work together.
The warm evening bath, the strategic extremity exposure, the ambient room temperature, the natural fibers of the sheets, they all work synergistically to facilitate that crucial, non-negotiable 1 to 3 degree core temperature drop.
They perfectly align your modern environment with your ancient evolutionary biology. And when the environment matches the biological expectation, the system functions flawlessly.
If we distill everything we've explored today, the most important realization is that sleep is absolutely not a passive state of just doing nothing.
Not at all.
It is a highly active, incredibly demanding metabolic process. And your core body temperature isn't just a side effect, it is the master switch that controls whether that process can even begin.
By understanding the actual plumbing, the vasodilation, the function of glabrous skin, the physics of evaporative cooling, you stop seeing yourself as a helpless victim of a racing mind, and you become the active engineer of your own physical recovery.
Applying these specific zero-cost protocols give you immediate, tangible levers to pull. The warm evening bath paradox, knowing exactly when and how to expose your extremities without spiking your cortisol, and clinically engineering your bedroom's thermal environment.
It gives you back control.
It really does. This is about establishing a biological foundation that guarantees better physical longevity and sharper cognitive function tomorrow.
It is deeply empowering to realize that the solution to a spinning, anxious mind at 2 in the morning might actually just be an issue of applied thermodynamics.
It really changes the entire conversation. But before we wrap up today, I want to leave everyone listening with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've unpacked.
I'd love to hear it.
We know now that a strict drop in core temperature is the biological master switch required to trigger rest in the evening. But think about how radically different our daytime lives are from our evolutionary ancestors.
The modern, artificially stabilized environment.
Right. Think about our entirely climate-controlled existence. Many of us wake up in a temperate house, get into a heavily air-conditioned car, and then go sit for 8 to 10 hours straight in a perfectly air-conditioned 68-degree office building.
Yeah, we never really get hot.
Exactly. If our biology strictly requires a high peak in core temperature in the late afternoon to establish a thermal contrast for the evening drop, how might sitting in a freezing, perfectly stable office all day long be completely confusing our biological thermoregulation before the evening even begins?
That is a phenomenal area to question. Are we severely blunting our own circadian rhythms by never allowing our core temperatures to reach their natural daytime thermal peaks?
It makes you wonder if our internal engine temperature gauges are getting stuck simply because we never let the engine run hot in the first place.
That makes a lot of sense.
You can't effectively cool down a system that was never actually allowed to warm up. So the next time you find yourself staring at the ceiling, remember, check your temperature gauge, open the oven doors, and let the server room cool down.
Step back and let the biology do what it was perfectly designed to do.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the everyday things, and we will see you next time.